Hi guys, this is Miss Lange, and this tutorial is going to be helpful if you are, first of all, just actually doing the metal piping tips on the cupcake still life, or if you are doing something else that might contain something that's metal or reflective or both. So this hopefully will be quite helpful for a lot of you. So here in the first slide, I just wanted to start off by kind of showing you the process that you want to go through when trying to capture something that has reflection or to it. So on this, you'll see I have my uh, two metal piping tips, and then what I've done is I've looked very, very closely at both of those, and I've tried to capture through just the use of line and organic shapes. I've tried to capture the different changes of value that I see within there. And so right now, you're going to notice that these look quite abstract, and maybe even kind of wondering how this would all come together to look realistic. Just to show you the difference here, after I did draw in my composition, I made sure to take my kneadable eraser and pull up my markings just a little bit so that it looked as light as possible, making it a lot easier for me to eliminate those outlines as I continue and progress through my composition. Here you'll notice I am starting to just pick one small area like we've been recommending to you. So for this first part, I'm really going to just focus on the inside part of the cone shape for both of the piping tips. I'm starting with the one on the left first just because I'm right-handed, so I'm working left to right. You'll notice I'm holding my pencil using the very flat edge, and I'll be using circular shading, irregular shading to help me fill in these values. Remember that you're building and creating those dark values, those deep dark values by layering. So I'm going to be using multiple layers to achieve my dark value, not pressing hard and scribbling all over. Right? So here I've begun to really fill in my values in the areas that I designated as the dark areas. Then I started taking some of those areas that were those lighter values and bringing in a much lighter value to fill in those spaces. I know that I'm going to need to come back if I look at my composition. I know I'm going to need to come back and pull those highlights, but I can do that with my eraser at the end. So I want to kind of just make sure that I have a nice even um, layer kind of put in before I do that. I am doing this entire composition in using a 2B pencil, and that's all that I use. So I achieved both my light and dark values with just a 2B pencil, just to kind of show you where we started from. As I continue on here, you will notice that I began to work on the outer edge of my um, piping tip and starting to again look at my composition and fill in the areas that are darker with my darker values, making sure I'm building up those layers, as well as coming in and filling in those lighter areas as well. And I'm being really conscious about my edges and making sure I'm eliminating those outlines and working right up to that edge there. In here, I've now kind of feeling pretty satisfied with my piping tip on the left. I want to move over to the one on the right so that I can really start to see my composition as a whole, and then I'll come in and kind of tweak those final details as I approach the end here. So I'm starting to again build in my dark value with multiple layers, achieving that dark inside value as I'm noticing it matching just like my photo that I have. I did put in a little bit of my cast shadow on my piping tip on the left. You wouldn't have to do that right away, but I just really needed to be able to see that edge for the piping tip on the right. So I just kind of filled that in just a little bit to give my eye a good representation of my values there. So here, you'll notice in the photo I have taken, as I'm working the composition, I have pulled out one of the eraser sticks. These work awesome for pulling in your highlights because you can get really fine line from those eraser sticks. So you'll notice in my photo I've started to pull some of those highlights now that are within the inside of both of my piping tips. I really wanted you guys to see now as I'm continuing on building in and filling in those layers, following my values. I even had the value finders with me, so I was kind of making sure to compare my values in my photo to the values that I had on my paper to help me make sure that I'm achieving that accurate range of values. And so here you'll see in the three photos that you're looking at, it's progressively getting darker by building those layers and focusing in those areas that I want. What we're starting to see is a much more refined composition, and we're really getting close to the final product. So, when you are doing your reflective material, it's really important to pay attention to not only the reflections that you're seeing and however they may be distorted within that reflection, but you also want to pay attention to the material itself. The metal piping tips are metal, but when I looked very closely, I noticed some slight kind of horizontal lines kind of capturing the roundness of those within there. I don't know if they were scratch marks or what they were, but following the rule of making sure you're drawing exactly what you see, I made sure to include those. So you'll kind of notice that on the piping tip on the left. It's just that extra little detail that really helps me refine this and get it close to being finished. So now I'm focusing on my cast shadow, really bringing in those values. I notice several different uh, darker values for my cast shadow. It's a little bit darker where the two piping tips converge together as opposed to the ones that are apart. So here is when I'm going to bring in my final touches, my cleanup work. So I'm going to need my eraser stick and also my kneadable eraser so that if I need to pull up any values I can. Um, as I'm working here. And the way that the light makes this look, it looks like I've lightened this completely. I haven't, and you'll see on the next slide, it goes back to the darker values that I had achieved originally. It's just the way that this particular photo was taken. But I really want you to pay attention to all the different highlights that I've now captured within my composition using that eraser stick and my kneadable eraser. I came in and pulled up those lighter areas. If you look at how the light kind of catches almost like a halo around both of the round openings of the piping tips, I really wanted to capture that. So I took that kneadable eraser and really went around those outer edges of my ellipses, or for you guys, you might be looking at that, wonder what an ellipse is. The circles or the openings, they're not a perfect circle, so that's why I was calling it an ellipse. And here we have the final product. I've really gone in and added in any additional highlights that I needed, tried to pull those out, really make those as accurate as possible. I've double checked all my edges. I made sure that if I needed a nice soft edge, I had it, which I really don't have in this composition. Everything's a pretty sharp edge with the way that those metal objects catch those reflections. And then my shadows are pretty sharp as well. Obviously, you would want to continue on with the background and the other pieces that were within that composition, but this tutorial was just strictly over the metal reflection. So that's what I wanted you guys to see. I hope it was helpful to kind of see the process that you go through, and let us know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.